About 20 years ago, I was sitting in an administrative meeting at my police department. The chief had made a promise to the city council that we were going to increase our in-service training. It sounded great. Everybody around the table agreed that more training was important. Then reality hit. We didn't have enough officers to cover the street if people went to training. We couldn't pull officers off shift because there was nobody to replace them. On top of that, the city wasn't giving us any additional money. So whatever we came up with, it had to be done in-house and basically for free. The room got quiet while everyone tried to solve the impossible problem. Finally, one administrator spoke up and said, "Why don't we make a bunch of PowerPoint presentations about department policies? The sergeants can read them during roll call. We'll count each one as 30 minutes of in-service training, and at the end of the year, we'll be able to tell the city council we met our goal." I remember sitting there thinking, yeah, but nobody's actually going to learn anything. And I wasn't the only one. I could see it on everyone's faces. Before I could say anything, someone else answered the thought that was on everyone's mind. Who cares? We just have to make the city happy. That sentence has stuck with me ever since. Not because it was malicious. It wasn't. It was the product of a system that cared more about checking a box than building better police officers. And unfortunately, that's how a lot of in-service training in American law enforcement still works today. It's not about protecting the officers. It's not about protecting the community. It's about protecting the government. Because all they have to do is say that they tried, but they don't have to try hard. And the reality is, they don't try at all. It's time to start telling our own stories. I'm Steve Kellums, and welcome to Blue Canary. Today we're going to talk about something that isn't flashy. It won't generate headlines. Politicians won't hold press conferences about it. The public probably won't even know it's happening. But it might be the single most important thing we can do to improve policing in America. Training. Not academy training. Not hiring standards. Not recruiting. What happens after someone pins on the badge? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. A police officer may receive hundreds of hours of training before graduation. But after that, in many agencies, training becomes an annual qualification, a few mandatory legal updates, and a collection of online PowerPoint presentations that someone clicks through while trying to answer emails. We've somehow convinced ourselves that this is enough. It isn't. Imagine if an airline pilot only flew in a simulator once a year. Imagine if firefighters only practiced pulling hoses once every 12 months. Imagine if surgeons watched an online video to stay current on emergency procedures. We'd never accept it. Yet, we've accepted it for police officers. Then we wonder why performance breaks down under stress. Today, I want to argue something that I believe should become the next major reform movement in American policing. Not another policy, not another oversight committee, not another slogan. Training. Real training. Scenario-based training. Weekly training. Repetition. Because officers don't rise to the occasion. They sink to the level of their training. Let's begin with what in-service training actually looks like in many police departments across America. An email arrives. You've been assigned mandatory training. The officer logs in, clicks through 35 PowerPoint slides, maybe watches a 20-minute video, answers 10 multiple-choice questions, gets an 80%, certificate printed, training complete. Really? Was anything actually learned? More importantly, will that officer perform any better when someone's life depends on them making the right decision under enormous stress? There's an enormous difference between knowing something intellectually and being able to execute it in the middle of a crisis. Psychologists, educators, athletes, and military trainers have understood this for decades. When stress increases, heart rate rises, vision narrows, fine motor skills begin to disappear, working memory shrinks, decision-making becomes more instinctive than analytical. The human brain doesn't suddenly become smarter under pressure. It falls back on what it has practiced. That's why repetition matters. Not because repetition is exciting, because repetition builds competence, and competence builds confidence. So let me ask you a question. Why do we train police officers so differently than every other high-risk profession? Take firefighters. The Insurance Services Office, better known as ISO, uses training as one of the benchmarks for evaluating fire departments. To maintain readiness, departments commonly provide at least 16 hours of in-service training every month, and many states require additional training on top of those minimum expectations. 16 hours. every month. Not every year, every month. Why? Because nobody expects a firefighter to remember how to perform a rescue based on something they learned 5 years ago. They practice constantly. Now, think about aviation. Professional pilots don't simply earn their license and call it good. They return to the simulators on a recurring basis throughout their careers, practicing engine failures, instrument failures, bad weather, emergency procedures, and situations they hope will never encounter in the real world. Why? Because when something goes wrong at 35,000 feet, that isn't the time to figure it out. They've already experienced it. They've already made the mistakes. They've already learned the lessons. Now, let's compare that to policing. In many states, police officers are only required to complete somewhere around 24 hours of in-service training over an entire year. 24 hours. That's less than 2 hours a month. And what about firearms? Most officers qualify once a year. Qualification, not training. Qualification. For many agencies, that means stepping onto the range, firing the required course of fire, and walking away. 12 minutes, maybe 15. Then we put the pistol back in the holster and don't formally train with it again for another year. Think about that. We ask officers to carry a firearm every single day, to make life and death decisions under incredible stress, to protect themselves, their partners, and the public. And our answer is often a 12-minute qualification once a year. Can you imagine telling firefighters they only have to touch a hose once a year? Can you imagine telling a pilot they only need one successful landing every 12 months? Of course not, because those professions understand something we've forgotten. Performance is perishable. Skills fade. Communication fades. Driving skills fade. Tactical skills fade. Physical control skills fade. Firearm skills fade. Everything fades, unless it's practiced. And that's one of the biggest problems in American policing. We've become incredibly good at documenting training. We've become incredibly bad at building performance. Those are two very different things. Checking a box doesn't make someone more capable. PowerPoint doesn't create confidence. Online modules don't build muscle memory. Performance comes from repetition, and repetition creates professionals.
The Legal Liability Risk Management Institute is the nation's largest provider of liability and risk management services in the United States. Our goal is to help reduce liability, reduce lawsuits, and enhance officer performance. Regardless of the size of your agency, we have a risk management solution. You may contact us at www.llrmi.com or call 317-386-8325.
If I were designing police training from scratch, I'd separate skills into two categories: critical performance skills and conceptual knowledge. Performance skills require repetition. Conceptual knowledge requires discussion. Those should not be trained the same way. First, we have physical control skills. Physical control deteriorates faster than almost any police skill. You don't stay proficient because you attend defensive tactics 4 years ago. You stay proficient because you've practiced every week. Simple escorts, handcuffing, ground control, weapon retention, team arrests, control holds, transitions. These skills should be practiced constantly, not because officers enjoy fighting, because the better they are at it, the less likely anyone gets hurt. Good control techniques reduce injuries to officers, reduce injuries to suspects, reduce excessive force complaints, reduce lawsuits. Everybody wins. Next, we have communication skills. Communication isn't something you're born with. It's a skill. It should be practiced exactly like firearms. Role-playing, mental health calls, domestic disputes, traffic stops, death notifications, talking someone out of suicide, talking someone into surrender, conflict resolution, listening, de-escalation, empathy, professional command presence. You don't become great at communication by reading about it. You become great by talking to people again and again and again. The big daddy in the room is firearms. Most officers qualify. Very few truly train. Qualification proves minimum competence. Training develops mastery. Realistic movement, use of cover, low light, decision shooting, partner communications, shoot, no-shoot decisions, medical response after shooting. See, the gun is only part of the event. The decision is everything. And a key to any deadly force situation is tactics. Tactics like building searches, traffic stops, felony stops, domestic entries, active killer response, barricaded suspects, team movement, contact cover principles. These skills are highly perishable. And if they aren't practiced, they disappear. And then, of course, there's emergency vehicle operations. Driving may be the most overlooked skill in policing, yet statistically, it's among the most dangerous. Pursuits, emergency response, backing, intersections, night driving, poor weather, vehicle positioning, precision stopping. We spend thousands of hours behind the wheel, yet many departments only train driving every few years? That makes no sense. You see, weekly doesn't mean 8 hours. Here's where people misunderstand the proposal. I'm not saying every officer disappears for an entire day every week. I'm talking about deliberate practice. 1 hour, 2 hours, rotate groups, short sessions, focused objectives, constant repetition. Professional athletes don't practice once a year. Neither should police officers. Now, not everything requires repetition. Some things require conversation. Things like leadership and ethics, constitutional law, recent court decisions, report writing, investigations, crisis intervention concepts, bias awareness, technical updates, policy revisions, community relationships. You see, these benefit from classroom discussions. Guest speakers and case studies, lessons learned, monthly sessions make perfect sense. But here's the key. Don't confuse conceptual learning with performance training. Knowing Graham versus Connor doesn't make someone better at handcuffing. Understanding crisis intervention theory doesn't automatically improve communication. Knowledge must eventually become action, and action requires practice. Now let's address the elephant in the room. Staffing. Departments will immediately say, we don't have enough people. They're right. Most agencies don't, which means we have a choice. Continuing to pretend current training is adequate, or hire enough officers to train properly. Training is not time away from police work. Training is police work. Every hour invested before a critical incident saves countless hours afterwards. Investigations, internal affairs, civil lawsuits, worker compensations, medical bills, bad publicity, community distrust, officer trauma. Those costs dwarf the price of training. This isn't just spending money. It's investing in prevention. We've spent years asking police officers to solve increasingly complicated problems. Problems like mental illness, addiction, homelessness, domestic violence, mass casualty events, medical emergencies. Then we give them fewer opportunities to practice than high school athletes. That isn't fair to officers. It isn't fair to the communities, and it isn't fair to the profession. If we're serious about reform, training has to become the centerpiece. Not because officers are failing, because excellence requires maintenance. Every profession that performs under pressure understands that. Policing should too.
When the shift gets long and the calls keep coming, the stress starts piling up. You need more than just background noise. You need the Thin Line Rock Station, real rock, real personalities, and a community that understands the job. Turn it up and ride with us. The Thin Line Rock Station, keeping those who serve connected one song at a time.
So far, I've spent a lot of time talking about what's wrong. Now, let's talk about what we should do. I don't believe we need to reinvent police training. We already know how people learn. Sports science knows it, the military knows it, aviation knows it, every profession that performs under pressure knows it. The science is pretty simple. Skills improve through repetition. Skills stay sharp through repetition. Skills fail when they aren't practiced. So, here's what we build. Weekly mandatory skills training. Every sworn officer receives a dedicated 2-hour training block every single week. Not when staffing allows, not if the supervisor can spare you. It becomes part of the work schedule. It's treated exactly like patrol, report writing, or court. Training is part of the job. Those 2 hours are broken into 3 very specific areas. The first hour is spent on physical control tactics. Not watching videos, not sitting in chairs, on the mats, with instructors, hands-on, every week. Handcuffing, escorts, ground control, weapon retention, team arrest, control techniques, transitions. The goal isn't to learn something new every week. The goal is to perform the fundamentals so often that they become automatic. Because under stress, you don't invent good tactics. You default to your habits. Let's make those habits excellent. After that hour, officers rotate to a driving simulator for 30 minutes. Emergency response, intersections, weather, pursuits, backing, decision-making, near misses. Modern simulators allow officers to experience situations that would be unsafe or impossible to recreate on public roads. They let instructors repeat the same challenge until good decisions become consistent decisions. Then, officers spend the final 30 minutes on the live fire range. Not annual qualifications, but training. Movement, cover, low light, decision-making, communication, shooting after exertion, stress inoculation, reloads, malfunctions, building confidence through repetition. Now, imagine that schedule repeated every single week. Not because officers are failing, but because professionals practice. Then we're going to add realistic stress. Here's another change I'd make. Training shouldn't always happen when officers are fresh, rested, and comfortable. Real police work doesn't happen under perfect conditions. Sometimes you've been awake for 16 hours. Sometimes you've just wrestled someone. Sometimes your heart rate is through the roof. Training should reflect reality. Have officers run before shooting. Have them solve problems while physically tired. Have them communicate after exertion. Raise the heart rate, increase the stress, force them to think. Because that's what the street does. The purpose isn't to make training miserable. The purpose is to make performance reliable. Continuing education should also be heavily encouraged. The mandatory training is exactly that, mandatory, 2 hours every week. But what if an officer wants more? Great, the doors stay open. If someone wants extra mat time, come in. Want additional range work? Come in. Need more simulator time? Come in. No additional training fees. No charging officers to become better at their profession. The agency already owns the facilities. The instructors are already there. Why wouldn't we encourage officers who want to improve? Some officers will absolutely take advantage of that opportunity. Those officers often become tomorrow's instructors, supervisors, and leaders. A culture of excellence grows when departments remove barriers instead of creating them. Then, once every month, every officer attends a full 8-hour training day. This is where everything comes together, part classroom, part discussion, part scenario. 1 hour might cover recent case law. The next might involve ethical decision-making. Then officers move directly into realistic scenarios where they apply what they just discussed. The mental health calls, the domestic violence calls, those traffic stops, a barricaded suspect, an officer rescue, an active killer response, maybe some use of force decisions, critical incident leadership, communication, medical responses, everything, all integrated into the same scenario. Because police work isn't divided into neat little categories. Real calls require officers to combine physical skills, communication, tactics, legal knowledge, emotional intelligence, and teamwork all at once. That's exactly how they should train. After every scenario, a full debrief. Discuss, ask questions. What worked? What didn't? Could we have communicated differently? Were our tactics sound? Did we slow things down? Did we create unnecessary risk? That's where real learning happens. Now, I can already hear the criticism. This is too expensive. It's impossible. We don't have enough instructors. We don't have enough facilities. I disagree. We simply haven't made it a priority. Small departments don't need to build $1 million academy. They should partner with larger agencies. County sheriff's offices, the state police, regional academies, nearby metropolitan departments share the instructors, share the facilities, share the costs. States should invest in regional training centers that every agency can use. Cities should work together instead of duplicating resources. Training should become a regional responsibility instead of every department trying to do everything by itself. We've done this successfully with SWAT teams, crime labs, emergency communications, and mutual aid agreements. There is no reason we can't do the same with training. Yes, this requires more officers. It requires more instructors. It requires more facilities and more money. But ask yourself this: what's the cost of not doing it? Every preventable lawsuit, every unnecessary injury, every officer hurt because tactics failed, every citizen hurt because skills weren't sharp, and every family that loses someone in a preventable tragedy. Those all have costs too. We simply choose to ignore them because they don't appear in the training budget. Training isn't an expense. It's insurance. It's risk management. It's officer wellness. It's community safety. It's professional excellence. And if we truly want better policing, then we have to build better police officers. And better police officers aren't created by PowerPoint presentations. They're created through practice, week after week, month after month, year after year, because excellence isn't an event, it's a habit. I'll leave you with this thought. Every major profession that carries enormous responsibility accepts one simple truth: competency is temporary. Skills fade, confidence fades, performance fades. Unless they're renewed. We don't expect pilots to stop practicing. We don't expect firefighters to stop training. We don't expect surgeons to stop learning. Why do we expect that from police officers? The future of policing isn't another policy manual. It isn't another online training module. It isn't checking another compliance box. The future is realistic scenarios, repetition, coaching, feedback, and enough staffing to make it happen. Because when the radio call comes, and it always comes, officers won't perform based on what they watched in an online module 6 months ago. They'll perform based on what they've practiced over and over until it becomes instinct. That's the kind of policing our community deserves, and it's the kind of preparation our officers deserve. And that's the story we have to tell. Thank you for joining. As always, I'm curious what questions you're getting asked. What isn't the news covering? What story needs to be told? Connect with me at bluecanarypodcast@gmail.com.